Hey, good morning. No, good afternoon. Early afternoon.
It is early. I'm Ramona Hall. I'm the Vice President for Friends of Acton Agua Dulce Library. And we are delighted today to present our pretty much biannual now charity event. And when we say charity, what we're talking about is we have local artisans decorate chairs for us, and then we don't really auction them off. We use them as prizes that people can buy tickets for, and we provide a luncheon. And all of the proceeds go to supporting our children's activity programs. And as you know, that's one of the things that the Friends do all through the year. And we have about 140 members who are Friends who support our group and who collectively help make this happen. So we're delighted. This one piece is something that I made. It represents Lenore from the poem The Raven. And the reason I thought that would be appropriate today is because we're having an actor come who will depict a scene from the life of Edgar Allan Poe. So we're so jazzed. Anyway, it's sterling silver wire wrapped cabochon, and then we have a darling little chair with a scene from one of the Mother Goose tales, and a beautiful secret garden chair that was made by our president, Kat Vandino, and it comes with a little doll in the book. And then we have these two chairs. One is representing the poem, Nevermore, and we have a little crow with a skull in its nest. And then the other one is from Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin. So hopefully we'll have a lot of people bidding on these, and we'll end up having a very productive event for our kids' programs. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Ramona.
Oh, my pleasure.
I mean, these are so creative.
I know.
So creative.
We have got, in our community, we have such a creative group of people, you know? So,
great. Thank you.
Oh, my
This is a unique appetizer. I mean, so appropriate. What is the dip in the middle?
It's just a light vegetable dip. What's in it?
This is a vegetable dip, and then there's some that are ranch.
Okay.
Okay, and the bread is hollowed out.
Okay.
It's filled with the dip, and then the vegetables are put in it, and it's used as an appetizer. So, and it's pretty healthy.
Oh, I think it's terrific. Especially for the theme, theme today.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Kimberly, right?
Yes.
And what is the name of your company?
It's called Sweet Addictions.
Sweet Addictions.
Oh, I want to get a
And
what we
you
have
tell me.
today is we have a pumpkin chiffon cake bar, a apple pie roller, which is filled with an apple pie, filling into a rolled crepe, deep fried and then covered in powdered sugar, a tangerine white chocolate skull, and then a meringue.
Oh, it looks wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
You know, there are some writers who seem to lead a private life that compares to the literary universe they create. One of them is Edgar Allan Poe, the father of mystery tales. His mere name echoes associations to the Gothic and grotesque. And in more than one way, his life parallels the mystic scenarios of his stories. The legacy of Edgar Allan Poe is there in today's crime literature and horror movies, and he is still among the most popular of American authors. His literary thesis is that man's response to events and time is universal, whatever happens. The human reaction is the same, regardless of setting and personality. His overall production totals only 48 poems and a dozen or so short stories, but his literary qualities and the originality of his plots put him in the front line of influential writers from the 19th century. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, my head is spinning. It is as if 1,000 nightmares were at once being dreamt within my brain. I cannot for the life of me recall the events of these past few days. As if my memory were trapped behind a wall of stone and mortar. Most curious are my clothes. The stench of cheap whiskey. I swear on the grave of my dear mother, I have not had a drop to drink. Today, my mother. Where is that now? And where is that? I keep with me, I've always kept with me a likeness of my dear mother in my pocket here, but these clothes are, oh, here it is. My mother. Well, she is very beautiful, Oh. Oh, I beg of your pardon, my dear ladies and gentlemen of the Literary Society. I did not see you there. I beg of your pardon, the state of my personal attire. I am usually more appropriately composed. My mother. She's very beautiful. Do you not agree? Eliza Poe, she was an actress. My father, David Poe, he was an actor. He abandoned our family when I was only 2 years old. I understand he was not very talented. I choose not to think on him. My mother was, however, richly talented. My earliest recollections of my actress mother were of her struggling valiantly to support her 3 children by performing numerous roles from Boston to Charleston. Oh, I have a clipping from the newspaper I'll share with you. If I can find it. Oh, here. Here it is. It says, "She never came on stage, but a murmur ran through the house. What an enchanting creature. Heavens, what a form. What an animated and expressive countenance. Never was anything half so sweet." My mother. While touring through Richmond, Virginia, she was struck down with the dreaded scourge of the consumption. Tuberculosis. The Red Death, I call it. Everyone in Richmond knew of her career and of her plight, and though the profession of acting was looked down upon, she was loved by all. Desperately poor, she lay dying in a squalid boarding house. I watched on helplessly as she coughed up blood and sank into delirium. She died on December 8, 1811. She was only 24 years old. I was not yet 3. Besides this likeness which I have carried with me all the days of my life, I have no tangible memory of my mother. But I have a bone-deep memory of her presence. And I most certainly have a bone-deep memory of her loss, never to see her again. But you, my dear ladies and gentlemen of the Literary Society, did not come here to listen to my life story. No, no, no. I am to read to you from my published works. Now here's a story that my publisher thought too loud for his readers. It is a frightening story. Do you want to hear a frightening story? Oh, well, good. Well, good, then perhaps you will appreciate this story of a man confessing to the police of his crimes. I call this story the Tell-Tale Heart. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been, and am. But why will you say that I'm mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was a sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object? There was none. Passion? There was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded. With what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, just at midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh so gently. And then when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a lantern, closed, all closed so that no light shone out. Then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so as to not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the room so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then when my head was within the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single dim ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him as he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own power, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. And perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think I drew back, but no. The room was as black as pitch with a thick darkness, but the shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew he could not see the opening in the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily. Steadily. I had my head within the room, was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in his bed crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle. In the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in his bed listening, just as I had done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh, no. It was a low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with... I knew that sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, while all the world has slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart, I knew he had been lying awake ever since that first slight noise when he had turned in his bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless. I could not. He'd been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is merely a mouse crossing the floor. And it is only a cricket, which has made a single..." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain. Because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my hand within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. And so I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray like the thread of a spider shot from out that crevice and full upon the vulture eye. It was open. Wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw with perfect distinctness all the dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. Now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now I say there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too, as the beating of the old man's heart, and it increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and stood still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker. And louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I told you that I'm nervous, and so I am. And now the dead hour of night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange and noisy that's excited and uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. Yet for some minutes longer the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. The sound would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart. I held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. The old man was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you'll think no longer when I describe for you the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then removed 3 boards from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the board so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking on the street door. Well, I went down to answer with a light heart. For what had I to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged to the police officer. The officers had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. But what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all through the house. I bade them search, search well. I led them at length to his chambers. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues. While I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat while I answered cheerily. They chatted familiar things. But ere long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued to become more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness until at length I found the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I spoke more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, yet the officers heard not. I spoke more quickly, more vehemently, yet the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key with violent gesticulations, yet the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, yet the noise steadily increased. God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore, I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. Oh, it grew louder and louder and louder, and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought and this I think, but anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark, louder, 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 villains, I shrieked, dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here, it is the beating of his hideous heart. Woo! How many times I thought the old man in that story to be my father, David Poe. Or perhaps my foster father, Mr. John Allen. And who knows, perhaps it is a bit of both. You see, upon my dear mother's death, my brother, my sister, and myself were scattered about the various foster homes. I was taken in by the Allen family. Mrs. Frances Allen was very fond of my mother, and she pressed upon her reluctant husband to have pity upon me, poor little wretch that I was in his eyes. I was only 3 years old. Yet in spite of his faults, which were numerous in my opinion, He did, however, provide for me in the manner of a southern gentleman. Yet a rift between me and this rough and tumble tobacco merchant grew. A rift I would try all my life in vain to mend. Mrs. Allen, though, oh, she showered me with affection. My heart was always open to her. I grew into a fine southern gentleman and somewhat of a natural athlete, which is saying very little, for we all know that a wild animal is a natural athlete. I did once, however, swim 6 miles against the current up the James River when I was only 15 years old. A feat that brought me much renown throughout Richmond. It was about that time I met my dear friend, Miss Jane Stannard. She was the mother of a school chum, and we became fast friends. We would sit and talk for hours on subjects the most important. And I had at last found someone who understood my sensitive nature. Without a word of warning, though, she died of a cancer in the brain. And I was lost. Hopelessly lost. I found myself time and time again praying for her miraculous return and crying myself to sleep right there upon her grave. Not long after, I learned of the illness of my foster mother, Frances Allen. She too was stricken by the consumption, the Red Death that had taken my mother. So this was not the first time. Sad to say, it would not be the last time I would be visited by this demon. She lay dying in her room. She lay dying in her room, and while she lay dying in her room, her husband, Mr. John Allen, paraded women of the most questionable reputation, conducting himself in a most obscene manner in her house. And though that behavior may be acceptable to some, I felt that women should be treated with respect and dignity. I told him so in no uncertain terms. His response was to disown me, kick me out of the house, remove me from his will. If ever I was in his will. If you determine to abandon me here, I take my leave of you and farewell. I shall be doubly ambitious, and the world shall hear of the son you thought unworthy of your notice. I was young. I was bold. I was bright. I was broke. The following year, I learned of the death of my foster mother, Frances Allen. You see, the death of Jane Stannard and of Frances Allen reverberated deeply within me the loss of my own dear mother, awakening a monster that ate at my soul all the days of my life. I have a poem I wrote some time ago of love and loss. I'd like to share this poem with you if I may. This poem here I call Annabel Lee. It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love. I am my Annabel Lee. With a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind came out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee. So that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason. As all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we. of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. So all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Did I mention I was married once? Well, I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea. And she too, if you can blame my damn luck, she too was taken by the same red death that had taken my mother and my foster mother. Oh. This letter, I believe, will illuminate things for you. It says, 6 years ago, a wife who I loved as no man ever loved before ruptured a blood vessel in singing. Her life was to spare her. I took leave of her forever and underwent all the agonies of her death. She recovered partially, and again I hoped. At the end of the year, the vessel broke again, and I went through precisely the same scene. And again. Each time I underwent all the agonies of her death. I became insane with long intervals of horrible sanity. During these fits I drank. God only knows how often or how much. My dear Virginia, it is safe to say that I did love you more than life itself. I regret I was never able to provide for you in a manner that a husband should. There was just never enough money. But there was love in that house. Didn't we have fun singing in the parlor, playing in the yard? You remember that one time we were playing hot frog in the yard? And I jumped too high, squatted too fast, ripped the whole back end out of my trousers. You remember that? Oh, I turned beet red with embarrassment. And you're just dancing around singing, and it's been his riches. My dear Virginia, I was never nearly good enough for you. I was always destined to sink my own ship at every turn. You know, I never told you, but when I interviewed with the president for that job at the Custom House, I'd been drinking. I arrived at the White House stinking drunk. Fortunately, I was intercepted by the president's son, who requested I return at a later date, entreating me to conduct myself more appropriately. I did return. I conducted myself perfectly. Though I did not get that job. Perhaps I should not have taken that opportunity to try to sell a magazine subscription to the President of the United States. But I could write. My dear Virginia, the years I spent with you were the most explosive of my life. I wrote the first short story. I wrote the first detective story. I truly believe I was ahead of my time. I wrote The Raven. I wrote The Raven while you were dying in the next room. Funny how that singular poem brought me so much fame and notoriety. Audiences would flock to see the mysterious and romantic Edgar Allan Poe give dramatic renditions of his poem, The Raven. School children followed me home yelling, Raven! Raven! Yeah, but then they skedaddled down the street when I chased them screaming, Never more! Never more! Fame. Fame. But no fortune. I made $14 for the raven. I have a clipping from a presentation I'll share with you. It says, his lecture was a rhapsody of the most intense brilliancy. His eyes glowed like that of his own raven. He kept us in trance. For my mother, for Jane Standard, for Francis Allen, for you, my dear Virginia, this poem is a mourning for your loss. The loss of your voice, of your touch, the warmth of your heart next to mine. My dear Virginia, never does a day go by where I do not miss you. Never has a moment passed where I have not longed for you from the bottom of my broken heart. I long for you now. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Nameless here, forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, too still the beating of my heart, I stood, repeating, 'tis some visitor, entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor, entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, nothing more. Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. Sir, said I, oh madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is, I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortals ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token. And the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, something louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter in there slept the stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door. Perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. Perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiled my sad fancy into smiling by the strange and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim, an ancient raven wandering through the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Platonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marvel this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly. Though his answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing, I know, living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door. Bird or beast upon a sculpted bust above his chamber door was such a name as nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on that placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather then he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me as my hopes have flown before. And the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless said I what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast, and followed faster till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore of nevermore. But the raven still beguiling my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking, what this ominous bird of yore? What this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking? Nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl, whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat, divining with my head at ease, reclining on the cushion's velvet lining at the lamplight gloated o'er. But whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press. Oh, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee. By these angels he hath sent thee respite and nepenthe from thy memory of Lenore. Quaff this kind nepenthe and forget thy lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet said I think of evil, prophet still if bird or devil, whether tempest sent or whether tempest tossed thee here shore. Desolate yet all undaunted on this desert land, enchanted on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly I implore. Is there balm in Gilead? Tell me I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet said I think of evil, prophet still if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore. Tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within a distant Aden it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get me back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above my door. Take thy beat from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of the palace, just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted. Nevermore. I beg of your pardon, my dear ladies and gentlemen. I'm not feeling quite myself today. Now I want to thank the library and the friends of the library. Of course, we're all friends of the library. Now Now I realize you all had to do battle with the elements this afternoon to be out here. I'm most appreciative. But truth be told, I had to do battle with death himself, so I think I win. Now, since we're in this institution of learning, and since you all paid mightily for the performance, I figure we might as well take a few moments to visit. So I'm more than happy to sit upon this chair, answer any thoughts, questions, ideas that you might have about Edgar Allan Poe, his life, his work, or even about the life of an itinerant actor who traveled the country doing something as insane as what you sat witness to just now. So I'm going to stand up here and you're all going to dazzle me with your brilliance. That's how it works. Anybody have any thoughts, questions, ideas that you'd like to share or ask or whatever? About Edgar Allan Poe, his life, his work? Yes, young lady in there.
Is it true that he was addicted to, I was thinking it was cocaine?
No.
No?
Edgar Allan Poe, there is not a person in this room that has not ingested 1,000 times more drugs than Edgar Allan Poe ever did. There's only one instance in his entire life that we know he took any drug at all. Once. And that was after his wife died. And there was laudanum sitting on the table, and he just took it and he drank it all down. And we suspect that he might have done that he might have tried to kill himself. He might have done it just as a plea. I mean, it didn't kill him. It probably messed him up pretty bad for the night. That's the only instance of drug use we ever know of. So there's none. Interestingly enough, he had his own Salieri, if you remember Mozart.
Right.
And even that has been totally blown out of proportion. Poe's was a little worse. There was a writer named Rufus Griswold who was a contemporary of Poe's, who was not, as you know, you don't go to the library and pull out Rufus Griswold books. And he just didn't have that it, whatever you needed in his writing. But he wanted it. And I gotta tell you, being a performer and meeting and knowing performers all my life, I can see what it must feel like for someone to want it so badly. And he worked at it. He wrote. Nobody cared. It's just nothing. Interesting. So he was a friend of Poe's and tremendously jealous of Poe, as you would have well imagine. Poe was the brightest light in any room he was ever in. Genius. Off the charts genius. I don't think he met anybody that was his equal. I really don't think. He came up with a Big Bang 70 years before Einstein was even born. And he wrote it. It's in his treatise called Eureka. He describes the Big Bang. First person ever actually put it on paper that we know of. When Poe died, Griswold, who had Poe's papers, Poe actually entrusted a trunk of all of his manuscripts to Griswold. Because Poe was, after Virginia died, he really was kind of a nomad for a while. And when he died, Griswold wrote the first obituary. It went in newspapers all around the country. It was rather lengthy. And, but it was a complete fabrication. It painted Poe as a drug addict, as a lech, as a plagiarizer, and of course none of it was true. Poe's cousin Nelson, who loved him dearly, was the first one to put together an actual biography, but it took him 10 years to actually compile the biography. And in that time, those 10 pages that Rufus Griswold wrote, this is 1849 to 1859, were the only thing that people really knew about Poe. And yet we still have this belief that Poe must have been addicted to some sort of opiate. From a maniac. It was 200 years ago.
I have a question. He was born in the South?
He was born in Boston.
In Boston.
But he grew up, he bounced around a lot, but Richmond, Virginia was the town that he considered his home. Although he spent 6 years as a child in London, in England, and he lived in New York, he lived in Philadelphia, he lived in Baltimore, but Richmond was always considered his home. He considered it. That's why we use that accent, the Richmond, Virginia.
And his family as well, or did they come from?
His family came from New England. His mother was an actress, was probably born and raised in New York area. Her parents were actors too, so she was probably born in a trunk someplace on tour. Poe was basically born in a trunk on tour. And he was probably born in the dressing room in a theater in Baltimore. Likely. But Richmond, Virginia was the place that he considered home.
The reason I'm asking is my great-grandmother was a Poe.
And from where?
Not sure.
Well, it's a fairly rare name. I mean, so
Is it?
and there are still Poes. There are still Poes. He had neither his sister nor his brother, so he has no direct descendants. But he had cousins named Poe, and it was a fairly substantial family. So they have their children. There's one or two of them have actually written books about Poe. You know, they're 5 greats or 6 greats removed. You know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did he have a short stint in the military?
He did.
That's the point.
And it included West Point at the end. An assumed name, Edgar Perry, because he was trying to get away from these kids that he went to college with. Because he got into some bad poker games and lost some money. And they hounded him because they knew that his foster father, John Allen, was a very wealthy man. And so he couldn't get away from him. And so he joined the Army. That's one of the reasons. Probably the reason for using the assumed name. But he excelled in the Army. Within a very short amount of time, he was promoted to a sergeant major, and he was in charge of his own artillery unit, and they loved him. And you got to remember, this guy was really bright. And when he put his mind to it, he was an athlete. When he put his mind to it, he could do anything. And so, but then he tired of it pretty quickly. Well, after 2 years, it's like he was just going crazy. He wanted to get out. He wanted to write. He wanted to get out into the world. He's a kid. He's a young man, right? 19 years old. So he went to his commanding officer. He confessed that he had come in under an assumed name, and they could court-martial you for that. But they decided, instead of court-martialing him, they will give him, because he wanted to go to college, they will give him an appointment to West Point. Instead of court-martialing you, we'll send you to West Point. And John Allen, who had long since had already disowned him, now was engaged to have to talk to some senators and people to get all the necessary paperwork for Poe to go. And John Allen was willing to do that. And so Poe went. But Poe didn't want to go. He wanted to get out. He wanted to go. He wanted his education. But he wanted to get out into the world. And a guy like Poe doesn't take authority very well. And so first semester, straight A's. It's like 3rd in his class. First in his class in literature, though, and in languages. I mean, he's just genius. And he doesn't. And indications are he didn't really study that. He reads it and he goes, "Okay, I got it," and then he moves on because he was spending his time writing. And then he just soured on the whole thing. He was just he just wanted to get out. And so he just stopped going to class until he got kicked out, court-martialed.
How did you happen to pick Poe as
People ask this a lot. I don't pick these characters. These characters pick me, and I really mean that, because the more effort I put into a particular character, the more books I read about him, doesn't mean that the door opens up. And I could be working on somebody and thinking this is going to be a great show, this is going to be a great show, and it's literally something taps me on the shoulder with another name or another persona, something, and I'm like drawn down this other path. Sometimes it's a literal path. Sometimes I'm drawn into rooms and I find books. And I'm like, okay, I'll do this. And so that's always been the way it is. But with Poe, you'll love this, Ramon. I was 9 years old. I was in my bedroom and my father comes in. It was dark, October, about this time of year, and he reads The Raven to me. Now, at 9 years old, I don't know what the hell this bird is doing in this guy's bedroom. But it's a little freaky, right? And it's scary and it's sad. It's just, you don't know how to react to it. Because you go, what is it? Is it scary? Is it sad? It's fun. And then my father said, let's memorize this poem, and we'll perform it for the family around Halloween. And so, of course, that seemed like the most fun thing in the world. And my father was this very dramatic fellow, and I thought, okay, great. So I started memorizing The Raven. Now, in order to do that, I had to go to the school library and pick out the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe about that day. And as I'm memorizing the Raven, I'm reading The Telltale Heart, and I'm reading The Cask of the Amontillado, and I'm reading The Black Cat. And I assure you, the other 9-year-olds in my 3rd grade class were not sharing my enthusiasm. And then, and I memorized. I must have memorized the first 5, 6 stanzas, and I'm working on it. And my father's not going to do this. This was either a ruse to get me to read, or he had every intention of doing it, and he just never did. I don't know. And he's long gone now. There's no way to ask. So, but that created a haunting for me. And I believe we all have these hauntings of characters who we've never met and will never meet from history, but we identify with them on a deep, profound level. And Poe was always like that for me. And so when the opportunity came to put together a one-person show, I pitched the Poe Show. And now I've got 8 of them. I was just voted best one-man show in Los Angeles by the LA Daily News. I do Poe, I do Einstein, I do George Burns.
Questions, factual ones. What was his wife's name again?
Virginia.
His wife's name, what was her name?
Virginia.
Virginia. Okay, and how old was he when he died?
He was 40. His death is probably the biggest mystery of his life. And if you're at all interested and you do research on him, I encourage you to research the tumor theory. Because that's the only one I think is probably true. It's the only one that has actual evidence to indicate that that's possibly the truth. So I'm thinking that's probably it.
He was exposed to tuberculosis 3 times and he never got it.
He never got it. So one of the theories, it's interesting, I've been doing this show for 16 years. You're the 2nd person to ask this question. And the first person was just the other day. And it was an 8th grader. But here's the thing. Right, so Poe is around, tuberculosis was a communicable disease and it was epidemic proportions back then. There's no way to treat it. And hardly anybody can get sent to Arizona to live. I mean, they didn't even know about Arizona. Where would you live? In a teepee with half your, you'd be dead. Anyway, so one of the theories is that he might have been a carrier. It happens. You can carry something without exhibiting signs or it affecting you, and that would, of course, be the ultimate irony for him. Because, of course, he loved his mother, he loved his wife, he loved his stepmother. And for them to die of this. But we don't know. I mean, they could have gotten it anywhere. Sad. A lot of people got it.
2 more questions. But did he die having been discovered and famous, or was he relatively unknown?
It's hard to say. I mean, he was well known in literary circles for years and years and years. He was a very famous critic, and he would write for literary magazines. Back then, that was how your stuff got published. If you read Charles Dickens and you think about that he was literally published in serial form, then you read how long it is and these great descriptions of stuff, and you realize, well, he's getting paid by the word, basically. The more installments, the more money, right? And that's why, but of course it's exquisite stuff. But he worked for magazines like that, literary magazines, as an editor and as a manager, and then also as a critic. And he was a very well-known critic. He was a tough critic. So that was how he made his living. So he was well known for that sort of stuff. The Raven was probably his best known work during his lifetime, and that was pretty well known. I mean, this guy could walk down the streets of New York City and kids would know who he was. People would say, oh, there's the famous writer Edgar Allan Poe. But he also had a pretty distinct look about him. Although I would imagine there were probably a lot of people back in those days who wore black frock coats and had long black hair and mustaches. But he had a very sort of distinct way about him. But his career was meteoric after his death. James Dean, and he became an international sensation. So it was about 25 years after he died, Walt Whitman and a handful of Baltimore socialites got together and raised, I I think it was $10,000 to build the new monument where he's buried now. He was initially buried in Pauper's grave in the back of Westminster Cemetery.
Was he a pauper when he died?
He was a pauper all his life. He never had 2 nickels to rub together. He's the first American author to completely subsist on what he made as a writer. But that was pretty meager. Pretty meager. So yeah, he died broke. He lived broke.
You mentioned Whitman. I was wondering what sort of a relationship we had with him. You were both considered the dark romantics of the period.
Whitman came after Poe, really.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of his popularity.
Right.
But apparently he must have really appreciated him because Whitman led the charge to raise the money to move Poe, and spoke at the dedication of his new site, the new services.
Do you think maybe he picked up that dark romantic mantle after him, or?
I don't know. I've never really studied Whitman, so I don't know. But you know, Poe was hugely influential. I mean, Poe, I like to say that Poe wrote like Van Gogh painted. Straight up, in your face, no metaphor, this is it. You know? And that's what was so beautiful about Van Gogh, what people couldn't get for so long. It was sort of similar with Poe. It was like, God, this stuff is, you know, some people say it's a little gauche. But then you go, no, it's fantastic. I mean, it's bold, but then the more you analyze it, it's beautiful, too. This young lady here again.
Of all the poems, why do you choose to perform the Telltale Heart?
That's a matter of logistics. Although it's probably my favorite story. I choose it for 2 reasons. 1, it's the perfect length to do in a 1-hour show. 2, it's one person speaking. There aren't multiple characters. And it's so dramatic, and I can just chew up the scenery with it. That's really. It's a show-off piece, right? And the Raven, of course, because you're expecting.
Oh yeah.
I'd have to do the Raven. I mean, if I came and did, you know, an obscure poem, Tamerlane, you'd go, what? Why would you do that? Yes, sir.
Where can we know when you would be performing some of your other characters and places? Is there a place to discover that?
You know, my name is my website, and you're always welcome to be my friend me on Facebook. That would be really great. And I post the stuff that's going to be local. I always make it with events, Facebook events, and I add all my friends that live in California to it. I have a spot on my website for the calendar, but I don't go there often. And I know I should. I just don't. So, but you're also welcome to send me an email and say, hey, please let me know when next time you're over in this part of town, and I'll say, and I'll put it on a piece of paper. It'll get lost in my desk. But I'll try to find it.
Do you know when you're going to be doing something in the LA area?
I'm.
Offhand?
Oh yeah, I'm probably going to be doing a Christmas Carol in Burbank. The third week of December, probably. I haven't gotten the dates yet. And I'll be doing my 9/11 show in South Pasadena, at the library in South Pasadena, the 9/11 show on November 30th.
Will we cry?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I do.
Do you know when you'll do Einstein? I would like to.
I'll do Einstein right now. I'll do Einstein. I need a hair, and I just need to change the color of my mustache. Once I do that, it'll be fine. You guys have been wonderful. Thank you. God bless you.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Romero, and I'm in 12th grade.
I'm Samantha Perez, and I'm a junior.
I'm Casey, and I'm a senior.
I'm Gabriel Villa, and I'm a junior.
Where are the guys?
Oh,
okay.
thank you
Great, thank you.
If I could go straight from here to the carnival that's at the high school. Already started, and
Yeah, this is going to
head over that way. And it's a lot of fun to go to the carnival if you want to stop over there, and then you're supporting the boosters, is that right, Lee?
You're supporting PTSO.
PTSO, okay. Okay, last chance to put your tickets.
Did anyone else want to do it here?
Anybody else?
We made it together. Bar chairs, they did it together.
This is for the funny.
Here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go. And no name. Lorraine. Oh, yay! I love this. I love her.
Oh, just do it.
Here's for the second chair.
Thank you, Lee.
Stirring, 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 stirring. Lily's gonna draw this time. What's it say? It says
Jen.
Not Jenny.
Jeanette?
Jeanette. Yeah, I think it says Jeanette.
Jeanette? With a phone number? Yeah. 323?
I told you.
Thank you so much, Duffy. Mr. Hudson.
What's that?
This is for you.
You won the Raven chair.
That's fantastic. I love that.
That's awesome. This is for the Stephen Garden chair. I think this is
I love this.
Cam. Cam Walter.
That is darling.
The chair was made by Shane Galinsky.
Shane.
So cute.
I'm really thinking about getting that, and then I thought the guards are too old.
Now my work is done.
Hey. Larry Van Loon. And now, the necklace made by Ramona Hall. Ramona makes beautiful jewelry, all sorts of necklaces, earrings. You do rings?
I don't do rings.
Okay, no rings.
I think it's because I don't wear them, so they just don't interest me.
Oh, wait, I don't think it's...
Oops, no name. 6, 7, 3, 8, 5, 1. 6, 7, 3, 8, 5, 1. 6, 7, 3, 8, 5, 1.